I was a cast member at Walt Disney World for 5 years. I worked at Space Mountain on my college program when they used to do private Space Jam cast member parties, and this is a cast member story. I started my career at Walt Disney World in 2017 at Space Mountain on the Disney College program, and for all those that have watched the previous episodes, no, I don't have an outfit for every single one of these. I've just gotten lucky that I happen to have all the merchandise that's happened to line up with each of these stories so far. But when I worked there, it was all of 2017. I was trained to do all the roles, but one really cool aspect were called Space Jams. Yes, just like the movie with Michael Jordan and the later one with LeBron, but the song is iconic, and that song is a really big part of kind of what cast members, specifically those on the college program, got to enjoy at Space Mountain once about every 6 months. So when new CPs, Disney College Program participants, would join, if you were in Tomorrowland, it didn't matter if you were custodial, if you were merchandise, food and beverage, if you worked attractions in other areas, once every 6-ish months they would bring in a bunch of people, have Space Mountain closed down normally for day guests, but then would have it open a little bit longer for about 2 hours for Disney College Program participants. This is a really cool experience because they got to see Space Mountain with the lights on. Yes, a true dream that very rarely do people get to see. The full lights on. I'm not talking, the people mover broke down and you get to see a little bit, you kind of get to see this. I'm talking full-fledged, all of the lights. What made it even cooler is you could eat food while getting in line, and some people definitely took it on the ride as well. The free popcorn, some of the free snacks and drinks. Imagine being able to just take a big popcorn and munch away as you're going through Space Mountain, and you can look down because the lights are on and wave hi to your friends that are zooming by. Space Mountain is a massive attraction that has 2 separate tracks, and those vehicles are constantly flying by each other. While it certainly feels like you're going to slam into stuff all the time when you're on Space Mountain, you never actually are going to. You'd have to be crazy to stick your hand out super far up or super far this way, and even still, 95% of people aren't big enough to be able to reach anything. That's not saying you should reach and try to touch stuff. I'm just saying the rides are built to be safe. Now, how cool is it that you get to see this? How cool is it that you get to do it with your friends? How cool is it that you get to do for this limited time Disney College Program experience? But what was really cool is working there, I got to actually be up in the tower control, and we got to even bring up some of the college program participants into our tower control. Now, for those that don't know, there's a bunch of different roles that run in operation. We've got the load people, they get you in. We've got the unload people, they get you out. And a bunch of other people like those who are grouping, those who are taken care of at the time Fast Pass, now Lightning Lane. There's people that merge the 2 lanes together. There's a lot, but some of the most important people are going to be those that are in the tower position. For Space Mountain, since there are 2 separate tracks that are totally separated, there's going to be 1 person per track monitoring their ride. While Space Mountain is shown as 1 attraction, it technically is 2. There's the Alpha and the Omega side, otherwise known as Side A and Side B. I prefer Side B. It's where we're going to send all of our guests that are going to be in wheelchairs because we are able to give them a little bit more room over there. The track is also technically a little bit longer by like a couple of feet. And when you take people into the tower control, you can kind of show them what exactly it means. So Space Mountain, as wonderful it is not a brand new attraction. We are not using, this huge computer system that's going to be showing you every single detail down to the bare minimum. Don't freak out. It's not like the ride's not safe. Again, I've talked about it in previous episodes. Disney is incredibly safe. It's just that when you go from something like Flight of Passage or Rise of the Resistance, and then you go to Space Mountain, you see an old school, really cool roller coaster. Because of that, we have a track map that goes up on the wall, and you can see the dots on where the vehicles actually are. Bunch of green dots. There's 13 vehicles usually per each side of the track, and you can watch these 13 dots bounce around, see how many people are in the load, see how many people are in the unload, and watch who's going up the lift, all of that stuff. We have the cameras, we can see you, it's not that old, but it is very fun to be able to watch those dots, and it was really cool to be able to show people. One of the fun aspects is that during that, I'm staring at the computer screen like this, watching everyone, making sure everything is safe, but we would let in a bunch of these CPs, again, from roles that weren't in attractions and didn't maybe necessarily know how a ride worked. They would come in and say, hey, hi, how's it going? I couldn't look away from the screen. I gotta keep staring there, being safe, all that stuff. We've got our name tags, as you know, for all cast members, but one of the things that I thought was funny that they let us do at the time is we'd be able to stick our name tag to the back of our shirt, and therefore people can kind of see our names and see exactly what we're doing, even though we're operating the ride. Usually our leaders or coordinators would walk them in and they'd say, hey, here's this, here's how we can tell where you are, here's how we know this is working. We'd have special buttons where we can kind of give a little bit more time to give vehicles space. We do that a lot if there's going to be a really big family of like 6 people that are going after a vehicle that only has maybe 3 or 4 people. We want to give them a little bit of time so that the vehicles literally don't catch up to each other. There's a bunch of safety features to make sure that doesn't happen, but we don't want those safety features to have to go off because that's when the ride emergency stops and we got to evacuate the whole building. The ride has a lot of features like that where you can kind of help the ride with efficiency. You can make sure that the ride is being as safe as possible. You can check and see where people are. It's very, very nice in that aspect. And it was cool to be able to show people what exactly goes on inside this operation. It's something that 99.9999% of people who visit the parks will never get to see. And even a lot of people who are on the college program, unless you're working a ride, don't really get to see that aspect. What was also cool about that is, again, it's a party. It was called the Space Jam, so the iconic song, which of course was not just played right there because I don't want to get copyright, but you understand. You know what song I'm talking about. Well, we could hook that up to the overhead speakers. So if you've ever been on either Space Mountain or another attraction, you've heard the gigantic overbearing speakers that basically just go, "This attraction is down." It's called the Voice of God at Space Mountain. It's called a bunch of different things at a bunch of different attractions, but you get it. You've heard the voice that's not so show-friendly, not so magical, the "Hey, we're shutting down," or "Hey, weather's coming in," all that kind of stuff. Well, it was kind of cool. You could hook up an iPhone right next to it and play music from the iPhone, and it would go through the speaker and would play out throughout the entire building. So a bunch of these college program students and other cast members, other people were able to join as well. It was just usually the CPs that were here at these events. We're able to listen to all kinds of music. We've got Disney classics from the early 2000s. We've got hip hop. We've got pop. We've got, again, the Space Jam song. And all of that would be playing while you're going around the building. As I stated, we would turn the lights on fully for them to be able to see the whole track as they're going around, but there was also parts that we would turn all the lights off, and I'm talking everything, including the blue tunnel. Now, you might have been able to experience this as an everyday guest if you've been to Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. During certain overlays, they do that where they're going to play music throughout the building, as well as turning off all the lights. One cool part about this, we'd give them glow sticks they can wear as bracelets, wear as necklaces, so while you're in pitch black darkness, nothing, you would be able to go around and just see a vehicle in the distance, whoom, covered in glowing lights, and whoom, go by you with some more glow sticks. It was a pretty cool experience, and it was something that was really nice to be able to offer to people that didn't get to do that. When I worked at Space Mountain, you probably hear people ask a lot, like, did you get to go on the ride a lot? You get to go on the ride so much. If you're ever going to work for Disney for an attraction, I really hope you like the ride because you will go on it again and again and again and again and again. And I mean that in a great way. I love Space Mountain. When I used to work at Flight of Passage, we even had opportunities to be able to ride with guests to make sure that all the 3D and the projectors were working. It was always funny to get in full costume as a cast member and load in on Flight of Passage, put on the glasses and look at them, and the guests thought it was a really cool story aspect, but really I was just making sure that the projector hadn't gone out and that the guests who just said, "The ride's broken, you need to send me through again," I had to make sure they were lying. They usually were. But when we're here at Space Mountain, that is just one of the opportunities that you can have if you work in Tomorrowland. I'm sure a bunch of other lands do that. I've heard of something similar happening with Kilimanjaro Safaris over at Disney's Animal Kingdom. I know that the Tower of Terror gives backstage tours to all kinds of cast members, not just those in attractions operations, so it's very cool if you have the opportunity to ever do that and see the inside of the Tower of Terror. Haunted Mansion does some of the stuff that's the same, but it was cool that this wasn't necessarily a backstage tour. It was a cool opportunity to show people how it worked, but it was that plus a party. So I love Tomorrowland. It was the first land I ever worked for Disney. It was also, growing up, always my favorite land. In fact, Space Mountain was my first ever roller coaster because my mom got Space Mountain and Spaceship Earth confused. So my first ever roller coaster was my mom sitting me on this thing, I don't know how, but never realizing that she was getting onto a high-speed roller coaster and then sending us through the blue tunnel, to which she immediately realized, what have I done? I've always had a love for Space Mountain, and it was really cool to be able to share that with so many people and to kind of show them how the ride and the operations worked. So if you're ever on the Disney College program, I hope that it still happens. It might not be called Space Jam anymore because our amazing leader Chelsea was in charge of it at the time, and she was both a Disney leader and someone that was a DJ at the same time. Might not be saying that 100% correct, but I know that she did have a side job working with DJs. Could have been before Disney. I believe it was at the same time. But she knew what she was doing, and she set up those Space Jams, and it was very, very cool for all of us to be able to experience that, and it was cool to be able to share the ride with people that might not work in rides. Now, as I have said before, I don't work for Disney anymore, but I did for 5 years, and I really enjoyed it. This is never a sales pitch to try and get you to join for the company. Work for whoever, go wherever, but these are pretty cool stories, and they are pretty weird perks that you do get for working with the Walt Disney Company. How often do you get to tell everybody, hey, I clocked out of work, I went out with some of my friends, and we had popcorn while going through Space Mountain with the lights on, screaming our heads off, having a wonderful time at 1 in the morning? Who knows? And that's a cast member story.